Hello everyone, how's it going? And welcome to today's Wild Rift video. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at my updated rune tier list. Now, I haven't done one of these so far in the patch 4.2 cycle. We're coming up to patch 4.2b, so there's been a few weeks since some of the changes of the runes in patch 4.2 and also some of the new additions to the runes as well, with the removal of Hunter Titan and also Hunter Genius. So I wanted to give you all my kind of thoughts on the runes. Now, you want to kind of take this tier list as a pinch of salt. Every single rune is pretty much situational, depending on what champion you're playing, what champions you're against, what champions are on your team. There are so many different situations for runes, but take this video as like a my thoughts video, like my thoughts on the runes, what best runes are there to take now in the current state of the game, and what we're looking forward to in terms of what runes should be buffed, what runes should be nerfed, and everything like that as well. So I got my tier list. I've got the Keystone, the minor runes, the Domination, Resolve, and Inspiration runes. So I'll go through every single tier of rune and I'll give you all my thoughts on the runes. Let me know what you think of this video down in the comments. Let me know what you think of the runes as well, whether runes should be buffed or nerfed or maybe even removed from the game. I know there's definitely one rune that I want removed from the game, but that'll be down in the inspiration tree, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. Actually, no, it's in the resolve tree. I nearly messed that up, but we're all good. Anyways, first up, let's take a look at the keystones. I think pretty much every single keystone is in a pretty good state at the moment. I think the only one I would say that's not in a good state is Font of Life. I think Font of Life is pretty much only used on Brom, and that's it. There's no other champions that use Font of Life at the moment. And if you take Font of Life, if you're basically inting, whether you're playing mid lane, baron lane, jungle, even support, ADC, and any lane, it's basically just Brom that uses Font of Life, because you use the Font of Life quite well because you can poke with your first ability, your appealing support as well, so you want to heal your allies a little bit more. But this doesn't really get used anywhere else. There was a meta where Font of Life was being used as a rune for some enchanter supports like Nami, Yumi, Lulu, Karma, champions like that, but then they pretty much nerfed Font of Life to the ground. So like I said, it's pretty much just Brom, and even Brom now sometimes uses Aftershock instead of Font of Life. That's how bad this rune is at the moment. So that's why Font of Life is sitting down in the C tier. But as you can see, hit an enemy champion with an attack or ability marks them. When you or your allies damage the marked champions, you heal those allies and also yourself. Like I said, not really the best rune. But on the other hand, we got the S tier runes, which every single one of these runes are just great. They're just great for pretty much every situation. You've got so many different, ways that you can use this rune. These runes scale really well into late game. They're still really good in the early game as well. You got Grasp Beyond Dying, which pretty much gets taken now on every single Baron lane champion. Sometimes even in the mid lane as well. If you're a melee versus melee matchup in the mid lane, just being able to heal up with your auto attacks with Grasp Beyond Dying when you're auto attacking enemy champions, getting the scaling health every single time you auto attack, and also dealing a little bit more damage. This rune's great. Allows you to sustain really, really well during the laning phase. Allows you to trade a little bit better as well if you really need that trading potential in the laning phase. And also you scale up as well because you get bonus health every single time you trigger Grasp Beyond Dying. And also it has a pretty low cooldown as well, so it'll come up quite often during fights and also during the laning phase. Lethal Tempo pretty much gets used on every single AD carry. I mean, there's even other runes as well that you can take with other champions as well. Like, Lethal Tempo can be used on champions like Yasuo and Yone, even Irelia as well. Champions that like a lot of attack speed. The crazy thing about Lethal Tempo is that it can exceed the attack speed cap. On most champions, or pretty much all champions, the attack speed cap is 2.5. And if you were to auto attack and get a few attack speed runes, if you were to hit 2.5, you can't go anywhere near that or anywhere above that. With Lethal Tempo, however, you can go above that 2.5 attack speed cap, which is really where Lethal Tempo could come in, because when you're auto attacking, you're gaining stacks of attack speed, and then the stacks of attack speed just keep going up and up and up and up, and then you can exceed the attack speed cap right at the end to get this huge burst of attack speed. Like I said, most of the time used on quite a lot of AD carries. Other than that, you can use it on some other champions. But the other rune that some AD carries use instead, and pretty much most bruisers and everything, and even assassins sometimes as well, take, is Conqueror. Conqueror is still absolutely great. Even though they tried to nerf this rune to the ground many different times, I still think Conqueror is in a really, really good spot. Again, kind of situational, whether you want like lethal tempo or conqueror as like an ADC rune in a way. But conqueror, either way, you can use it on baron lane champions, you can use it on mid lane mages, or sometimes even assassins. You can use it on jungle champions, ADCs. There's so many different champions that use conqueror so well, because all you have to do is auto attack or use an ability, and every single time you auto attack or use an ability, you generate stacks. Them stacks give you AD or AP depending on what stat you have more of at the current time during the game. And then when you get the maximum stacks, you get a whole bunch of omnivamp, which gives you the physical vamp, the magical vamp, and everything on top of that as well. So overall, a really great rune for pretty much most champions, to be honest with you, because gaining more damage is pretty nice, and also gaining that omni vamp at the end as well is also pretty nice, because you can heal up if you do go drop low on health, if you really do. On to A tier. I mean, these runes are pretty good, to be fair. Even the B tier runes are pretty good, to be fair. I just think the B tier runes are just a little bit weaker, to be honest. I could probably move like Kraken Slayer, Fleet Footwork up. But like Electrocute, pretty good. Gets used on some champions at the moment. Electrocute is in a pretty decent spot. It's been buffed quite a few times as well. Like the scaling went up on Electrocute, so now it scales much better into later stages of the game because the cooldown gets lowered, and also the damage goes up quite a bit in the later stages of the game. So it doesn't get near enough outscaled as what it did before in terms of, comparing it against Conqueror. But really good for like early game pressure if you want to take early game trades in the laning phase, or if you want to take Electrocute in the jungle and go for them early skirmishes. You do quite a lot of damage with Electrocute. Works really well with champions that like to auto attack and use abilities very quickly. Champions like Kha'Zix can work really well with Electrocute, but even so, you take Conqueror instead of Electrocute for Kha'Zix at the moment, just because the extra damage is absolutely insane and the extra healing. But Electrocute, still pretty good rune, more for the early game pressure. Still doesn't scale as well into late game as like Conqueror, Lethal Tempo, Grasp Undying, for example, but still a pretty good rune to take if you want to try and get that early burst damage and try and get the early advantage. Summon Airy most of the time just gets used by supports. Summon Airy doesn't really get used in any other lane at the moment. There's not really any other lane that you want to take Summon Airy for. It's mainly just for supports, just to give your healing and shielding more power, and also to give you a little bit more poke damage during the laning phase, whether you're playing champions like Lulu, Yuumi, Nami, Karma, champions like that. They all use Summon Airy, and they all use Summon Airy really well. That's why this rune is still really good. Most enchanter supports, and you're going to run Summon Airy most of the time with the enchanter supports, like I said, to give your healing and shielding more power, to give you more lane phase pressure. And this also scales pretty well into later stages of the game, because your healing and your shielding and your damage also scales with AP, which most enchanter supports like to build a lot of AP anyway, whether it's from like Staff of Flowing Water, Ardent Sensor, items like that. So pretty good rune overall. Again, more for the support role, but still really good. Aftershock again, sometimes, well, most of the time gets used by supports down in the dual lane. Will most of the time be for tankier supports like Nautilus, Alistar, like I said, even Brom as well can take it. Gragas support, Rakan as well sometimes takes Aftershock. So it's just any sort of champions that want to engage. If you're an engaged champion, you want to take Aftershock. This sometimes gets used in the jungle a little bit, whether you want to play Nautilus jungle or even a new Ornn jungle. You could take Aftershock as well, just be a little bit more tankier when you're looking for ganks. But basically any champions that has a lot of immobilizing abilities, which most of the time are going to be them tank supports like Thresh, etc. You gain bonuses, you gain a little bit of more damage. So it's quite nice to take Aftershock, whether you're taking them sort of champions. And like I said, the rune is really strong, to be honest with you. Gaining bonus defenses, gaining bonus damage after a little bit of time is very powerful, especially for them tank supports that are already building a lot of health and a lot of armor and a magic resist. So very strong rune there. Kraken Slayer down in B. This is just because Kraken Slayer doesn't scale as well into the late game as well as like Conqueror, for example. There are some champions that can use Kraken Slayer very well, like Lucian and also Ezreal, but this still gets overrun by like Conqueror and Lethal Tempo. I can't really think of any other champions that use Kraken Slayer in any other lanes, to be honest with you. Most of the time I would just want to go for Lethal Tempo or Conqueror instead. It's quite a unique rune, only works on a few champions. Like I said, it works best on Lucian. In terms of any other champions, I mean, you can also use this on Senna as well. Senna and Ezreal you use Kraken Slayer over like Grasp or Conqueror, etc. That's because Kraken Slayer now works with on-hit effects, which is Sender's first ability and also Ezreal's first ability. So you can stack it quite well in the early game and get a few trades off. But again, it doesn't scale as much as Conqueror into late game. There does come a point into the game where Kraken Slayer is going to be weaker than Conqueror, and that's just kind of how it works. You know, that's just kind of how the Rune works. But again, the Rune is still really good if you want early game pressure. If you want to try and take trades in the early game, then you can go for Kraken Slayer. Fleet Footwork, not really a carry sort of rune. This is more of a defensive rune for champions like Akali, for example, that don't have the best early game, and you want to have a little bit of healing potential in the early game and a little bit of defensive capabilities in the early game, whether it be through you know, the healing for Fleet Footwork, the little bit of movement speed, the regeneration of the mana or the energy when you're auto attacking enemy champions. Again, this rune doesn't really do too much in the late game. When you're in team fights, this rune doesn't really do much at all. It gives you a little bit of extra movement speed, and that's about it, to be honest with you. Yes, you can regen mana and energy, but to be fair, that doesn't really mean too much at that stage of the game, because you already should be, you know, using your abilities very, very wisely, and you shouldn't be running out of mana very quickly. So yeah, Fleet Footwork is one of them runes where it's like, if you want to have a bit of 1v1 potential in the early game, and if you feel like you're going to be put under any pressure in the early game, then you can go for Fleet Footwork. Sometimes this gets used on champions like Camille as well, because Camille works quite well with the movement speed. Every single time she auto attacks that enemy champion, which she'll be able to do quite easily with her ultimate. And again, gets used on Akali if you're against a really, really bad matchup and you feel like you're just going to get poked out and just get, you know, stay on the tower for the whole game. But again, most of them champions you want to go for like Conqueror instead, or even Electrocute, or even Grasping Undying for champions like Camille, because it just gives you a lot more pressure in the later stages of the game. Like I said, Fleet Footwork basically becomes useless later on. Phase Rush, this still gets used a little bit by some champions, even though it got nerfed a few patches ago. It still gets used by champions like sometimes Graves can use it very, very well. The only real champion I can think of at the moment. Alistar can sometimes use this really well. And the reason being is that when you use your combos and when you use your abilities, you reduce all the cooldown of your abilities by, I believe, like 20% or something like that. And also you gain a bunch of ability haste when you proc Phase Rush. So if you have champions that have, like, you know, dashes or ways to combo and ways to CC, champions like Alistar, for example, which can easily just use the headbutt pulverize combo plus an auto attack, boom, you proc Phase Rush, you become super speedy, you become super annoying to deal with. Kind of same with Graves as well, whether you land, you know, an auto attack or your second ability and then your first ability, or you proc two parts of your first ability by bouncing off a wall and then auto attacking, you can proc Phase Rush quite easily. And the movement speed is quite nice, to be honest with you. There was a point during the meta where Phase Rush was really broken on Graves, but I'm just not too sure now, because it got nerfed a few times, and like I said, it's not really an impactful rune compared to, you know, runes like Conqueror, Lethal Temper, and Grasp of Dying, which all give you offensive stats. They all give you stats that you want, whether that be damage, attack speed, you know, more health. All the runes that are in the S tier all give you impactful stats in the game, which you want, you know, to try and be able to carry. And I talked about Font of Life already a little bit, but like I said, pretty much only gets used for Brom, and that's about it, to be honest with you. We got all the minor runes here. Obviously, we'll go through each individual one. First is Domination. I think Domination has some pretty damn good options. I don't think there is a bad option in a Domination tree. I still think there are some options that are better than others. Now, I know like some of the Chinese pros love Brutal at the moment on like AD carries a lot better than Hunter Vampirism. But Hunter Vampirism, I still feel like it's really, really good because it gives you the physical vamp in the early game. Again, it's one of them situational runes. You know, if you want to play a bit defensive, if you want to get a little bit of physical vamp in the early game to stay in lane longer, cool, go with Hunter Vampirism if you feel like you're going to get some more stats. But Brutal is all about the early game trades, all about trying to get the bonus on hit damage as well. And also if you auto attack a lot, it's pretty good. But anyway, like I said, I don't think there's a bad rune here at all. Triumph is insanely good, whether it be, you know, champion takedowns restoring missing health, which is really good for any sort of bruisers or even tanks, because you build a lot of health anyway. So the more health you have, the more missing health percentage you'll have as well, so you'll get more healing from Triumph. And also you get to deal more damage to enemies that are low on health. So if they are low on health, if you go in for a combo, whether that be on someone like Darius, Camille, you know, any sort of champions like that, you get to deal more damage. pretty good for a rune, to be honest with you. And even some AD carries like Jin now take Triumph as well, just because the extra damage and also the health restore every single time you get champion takedown, which does count an assist as well. So even if you do get an assist, you do still get that little bit of healing. Giant Slayer, just because I think the meta is still very bruiser and tank heavy, this rune is still pretty good. Maybe this doesn't deserve to be S tier. Maybe this deserves to be like down more in the A tier now, because this is still very situational. Like, I don't think it's S tier worthy that you take it every single game, because there's some games where champions go 5 AD carries or enemy team comps go 5 AD carries, then Giant Slayer becomes useless. But again, all it takes is just reading the rune and understanding the rune to then realize, oh, I need to change my rune because enemy champions on the other team are not going to be building bonus health. That's just a way of, like, you know, thinking, whether you play games a lot or not. When you do start to play loads more games, you start to realize what items champions like to build, and then you kind of work out the equation in your head. You know, if you work out in your head, you know, oh, like a Camille likes to build Divine Sunderer that has maximum health, Hullbreaker that has maximum health, Sterix Gauge that has maximum health. Oh, I can do a bonus 14% damage to that champion because they have over 700 health. You know, it's equations like that. Whereas like an ADC, they don't build any maximum health at all, so you're not going to deal any damage. So again, it's just one of the things of like understanding the rune, also understanding your enemy champions and what items they like to build, which is why this website is so good, because you can see pretty much the go-to builds for every single champion. Which actually, I just thought about it, if you're against champions that you don't really know what they build or what they do, you can always check the website and check out what they build and check out what items they go, and then you can add up the runes and add up everything to be able to get into it. So yeah, to realize if to realize if Giant Slayer is worth it or not. So yeah, pretty good tip there. Hunter Vampirism I just talked about ever so slightly, but yeah, like I said, the physical vamp in the early game is quite nice, especially for more weaker champions in the early game like Tristana and Vayne. They work well with with the physical vamp. And every single time you get a takedown, you gain 2 AD and 1% physical vamp. This sometimes gets used to effectiveness on AP champions, but to be honest, most AP champions don't really take Hunter Vampirism. I think it's pretty much more of an AD rune. I can't really think of any champions that would want to go for Hunter Vampirism compared to like compared to like Gathering Storm or even Scorch or something like that. But yeah, still really good rune. Still can be used. It can even be used on bruisers as well. Bruisers, junglers like Graves and Volibear, bruisers as well. It's still very, very strong rune. Weakness is pretty insane. Basically any champion that has like any, you know, immobilizing effects, really, really good on. Whether it be any tank supports like Nautilus, Alistar, Thresh, any champions like that, you land a hook, you land a headbutt, pulverize, you proc weakness straight away, which allows you and the rest of your team to deal 5% more damage to that champion, which is actually very, very strong. But it even works really well on some other champions as well. Whether you're playing, you know, Nautilus in the jungle, you're playing Ornn in the Baron lane, you have to remember that this rune also works on yourself and allied champions. So when you're knocking up someone with Ornn, or whether you're, you know, doing anything else, whether you're using your ultimate on them, they're going to take 5% more damage. So you have more 1v1 potential with weakness because of how many immobilizing effects you have. So weakness, very, very strong and very, very insane. Sudden impact, really, really good. Pretty much on most assassins or any champions that have like any sort of dashes. Kayn, for example, this could be really, really good on Kha'Zix, Evelynn. Basically any assassins that have stealth or have a way of dashing or leaping or teleporting or anything like that, because you gain the armor pen and or the magic pen, depending on, again, the adaptive damage. So allowing you to get more penetration means it's going to be really, really difficult for the enemy champions to dodge that, because obviously armor penetration, magic penetration ignores some of the armor and some of the magic resist that enemy champions might be dealing. So again, very, very strong rune, mainly used for assassins, but still insanely strong. Gathering Storm as well. This is basically, if this was just an AD rune, if it was just that every 3 minutes gain the AD, this would be done like the C or the D tier. It's really, really bad. But the reason why this is quite good is the AP option. The AP option for this rune is insanely strong because it scales much, much quicker, and it scales a lot quicker into later stages of the game. The only problem now is that Gathering Storm is a little bit weaker now. I feel like I need to change this a little bit. I think Gathering Storm should be down here, and like maybe Scorch should be up here. And the reason being is that, you know, Gathering Storm, I mean, Gathering Storm is still good. I'm not too sure if Scorch is better than Gathering Storm. I mean, I'd love to know like what the average game time is right now, because Riot tried to quicken up the games and tried to accelerate the games quite a bit in the most recent patch. So that's why I'm thinking is like, will Gathering Storm get to a stage of the game where it becomes stronger than Scorch? Which, to be honest, Scorch still is like what, 42 damage? So you get like, you already get 28 damage at like 9 minutes. So you probably have to get to a stage where you get like, you know, to 12 minutes, maybe above 15 minutes. This will be, you know, actually no, I think it'll be above like 9 minutes, because you have to remember this is ability power. So this will not only improve like, you know, your abilities, but obviously will improve other stuff as well. If you have a shield that has AP scaling, that will be improved. If your auto attacks is, you know, AP scaling, if they have like, you know, some decent other auto attacks with your ability power, then again it will improve that. So there's many different ways that this ability power can be used for Gathering Storm, and that's why I think it's better than Scorch still. But again, Scorch has been a lot more popular now just because they've been using it a lot more, and also it's been buffed quite recently. And then Brutal Scorch. The reason why these two are down in B tier is because these are a lot more early game runes. These give you a lot more early game power during the laning phase, but pretty much once the laning phase is over, you don't really feel the impact of these two runes. Whether it be Scorch, when, you know, dealing ability or to an enemy champion deals additional magic damage after 1 second, has a quite short cooldown, but it's still, you know, pretty decent during laning phase. And then Brutal, giving your basic attacks bonus, you know, bonus damage. Again, both of these two are really good during the laning phase. If you want to play aggressive, if you're playing champions like Draven, for example, that wants to play super aggressive during the laning phase, then, you know, Brutal can be really good. But again, to be honest, most of the time Draven players go for Hunter Vampirism anyway, because they want the early game physical vamp and also scaling physical vamp as well. So again, it's one of the things that's like, the runes are good and they can still be used to effect, but they just don't feel as good after a certain point during the game. You know, like I said, most of the time it'll be just after the first 4 minutes, because after the first 4 minutes, all hell just breaks loose when the major objectives spawn. This is where you want, you know, runes like Hunter Vampirism, so you can get, when you get takedowns, you get the bonus AD, Giant Slayer, because champions will be building, you know, health already. Gathering Storm, you get more ability power. Weakness to give you more, you know, damage to your team and also to yourself when you're mobilizing champions. So you kind of see where I mean. You know, Brutal and Scorch, more of an early game rune, still scales quite well into late game, but not as much. Resolve Tree, the only rune to get a D tier is Loyalty. By the way, Loyalty just needs to get removed from the game. This rune is awful. I'm going to start off down the D tier because this rune is just terrible. It's shocking. The only champion that this rune is good on is Yuumi. And the only reason it's good on Yuumi is because you sit on people. That's the only reason. No other champion, no other player takes this rune. Every other rune in Resolve Tree pretty much get used. Maybe not Conditioning as well. Maybe Conditioning is not that great. But Loyalty is just awful. Like, this rune is completely awful. I don't know any situation where anyone would take Loyalty over any other rune. Like I said, do not take Loyalty on any champion, only take it on Yuumi. And to be honest, even Yuumi, to be fair, I'd rather go for like Bone Plating when you get jumped out, or freaking Nimbus Cloak or something like that, you know. I'd still rather take another rune other than Loyalty. But yeah, anyway, starting off with the D tier, Loyalty is just awful. I don't really like Loyalty at all. The bonuses don't really do anything. Yeah, it's awful. I don't like it. Anyway, on the opposite side of the spectrum, we have Bone Plating. Bone Plating is still insanely strong. This rune got nerfed a few times, but the rune is still insanely powerful, whether it be to block against you know, trading damage in the early game. This could be used quite effectively with Baron laners when you're trading during the laning phase. If you're against like a Renekton, for example, that likes a lot of combo damage, you can just take Bone Plating and pretty much stop all that combo damage. Really good in the dual lane as well, because you can win trades quite easily, and it also scales really well into the mid and late stages of the game, because the great thing about Bone Plating is it just reduces damage. It doesn't reduce damage by like, you know, it just reduces damage. It's not like a certain number or a maximum number it can be reduced by. It's just reduced. So it's really, really good. Scales really well into the mid and late game, and like I said, helps you a lot against assassins and bruisers that might jump on top of you. Pretty much any other lane, you know, any lane can take this rune and become, you know, have great effectiveness, you know, even in the jungle as well. This could be really good for like skirmishes or even ganking. Nullifying Orb, maybe not as strong as what it used to be, just because, you know, Bone Plating is really strong at the moment, Second Wind and also Perseverance. To be honest, Nullifying Orb can probably move down ever so slightly, maybe. Maybe Ultimate Shield can move up with conditioning down there. I don't know. This probably, like I said, this tier list is so difficult because there's so many runes that are like, you know, can be good and can be bad in such situations. But I mean, Nullifying Orb is still pretty good because when you drop low on health, you gain a shield. And the great thing about Nullifying Orb is that it scales with your bonus AD and also ability power. So this works really well on champions that like to build a lot of AD or build a lot of AP. Doesn't get used on tanks as much because the base value is not that good anymore because it's gone nerfed quite a few times. Any champions that like to build a lot of attack damage, so like ADCs for example, or even assassins, or any champions that like to build a lot of ability power, it's really good because Nullifying Orb then scales really well in the mid and late stages, and that shield can really help you out. I've been baited a few times by Nullifying Orb shield, I'm not gonna lie to you, so it can surprise enemies pretty well. So yeah, it's a pretty cool rune. I still think it's really good as well. Second Wind is insanely strong. You pretty much use this on most melee champions at the moment, whether it be in the Baron lane or the mid lane. You can even sometimes use it down in the bot lane as well if you're against a lot of poke champions. That's one bad thing about bone plating, by the way, is that if you're against poke champions, they can easily proc bone plating and then look to engage afterwards when bone plating is on cooldown. So bear that in mind. But on the other hand, if you're against poke champions, then Second Wind is really good because you gain health over time. You basically restore health over time. This effect gets doubled by melee champions. And the great thing is when you haven't taken damage in a few seconds, the stat gets increased. So, and it also obviously scales with your missing health. So the more missing health you have, the more you'll be healing. Like I said, this is really good for like Baron lane champions, especially tanks like Dr. Mundo, Malphite, and Ornn, because you can walk up, take a small trade, walk back, and if Ornn's like forged an item, you can then heal back up to full HP, but you can heal back up quite quickly. Again, really effective on melee champions, not as effective on ranged champions, but still a very strong rune. And Perseverance as well. This is a new rune that got added in patch 4.2, insanely powerful. If you're against any champions that have any crowd control, it's insanely good. Just take this rune on any champion, honestly, any champion, supports, AD carries, mid, jungle, top, just take this rune. It's insanely powerful. You already gain tenacity. You gain a flat 10% tenacity, which stays at 10% throughout all stages of the game. Really good. And then when you're immobilized, you gain armor and mag resist for a few seconds, which can be refreshed if you're immobilized a few times. Very powerful rune. Like I said, against any crowd control, whether that be, I don't know, Nautilus Hook, Thresh Hook, Light Binding from Lux, Dark Binding for Morgana, any sort of crowd control like that, Perseverance works really well. So again, take this rune if you're against a lot of crowd control. Adaptive Carapace is still pretty good. This mainly gets used in the early game really effectively because you gain maximum health in the early game, 50 maximum health. You just gain flat in the early game, which is quite good, especially for supports as well, because trading with supports are quite strong, especially enchanter supports, because you can gain a little bit of health in the early game, which can work quite well, which then you get relic shield, which that stacks up. So you actually gain quite a lot of health for enchanter supports, which are really nice for them, because enchanter supports don't really build that much resistances. So gaining health and then gaining resistances when you drop low on health is quite nice. So yeah, you gain health at the start of the game, which gives you a lot of early game power. Then you drop low on health, you gain armor or mag resist depending on which damage you took more in the first 50% of your damage dealt. Really good. Sometimes gets used in other lanes as well, but I think it's just overpowered by like Second Wind, bone plating, Nullifying Orb, and Perseverance. That's why this rune's down the B tier. Conditioning doesn't really get used too much. Again, I think it's another rune that really should be remade or rethought about because this rune is just not that great. Again, these sort of scaling runes that, you know, give you more damage and more resistances over time is going to get weaker and weaker, in my opinion, because the games are getting quicker and quicker. So they're not going to be as strong. That's why some people taking Scorch now over Gathering Storm. But yeah, same with conditioning. You gain armor and mag resist every 3 seconds. Or sorry, after the first 3 minutes. And then every 2 minutes afterwards, you gain bonus armor and mag resist. Again, it can get used on champions that scale well with armor and magic resist. Champions like Ornn, which you get more bonuses from your passive. And also Rammus, which also you get more bonuses from your passive, and you get to deal more damage. But other than that, not really that good. And to be honest, like I said, even for Ornn, you want to take Second Wind instead, and even for Rammus, you want to take either Perseverance or Bone Plating to take reduced damage. So again, it's one of the runes that I just don't think is too great. Ultimate Shield is a pretty unique rune because it only gets used on champions that doesn't have as effective of an ultimate. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So champions like Malphite, for example, their ultimate, the knock up champions. By the time you knock up a champion, your ultimate shield is going to be gone. Same with, like, I don't know, Nautilus, for example. Nautilus, you knock up an enemy champion. That champion cannot damage you whilst you're using your ultimate. So that shield that you're gaining, yes, can be used, you know, if any other enemy champions are nearby, I can understand that. But if you're in a situation where there's no other enemy champions nearby, ultimate shield just becomes useless. And to be honest, like I said, I'd rather use bone plated for the reduced damage, second wind for the healing, perseverance for the extra resistance and tenacity. Ultimate shield can be good on some champions though, even though, like I said, I think most runes are a lot better. Champions like Samira can be really good because you gain a shield when you use your ultimate, which can be quite vulnerable. Jarvan as well, because you're going to be stuck in your ultimate with other enemy champions. Olaf, because you lose your armor and magic resist, so gain a little bit of shield is quite nice. And other champions like that. So yeah, that's why I feel like ultimate shield is not that great, but it can still be quite unique on some champions. And then lastly, we move on to the inspiration tree. Again, quite a balanced rune set, I would say. That there are mainly a lot of unique runes in inspiration, whereas like resolve, you have like runes that get used on a lot of champions like bone plating, nullifying orb, second wind, and perseverance. Even domination as well, like a lot of different champions use like triumph, giant slayer, hunter vampirism, weakness. Inspiration, I feel like, is more of a unique, and probably this is going to be the rune set that you change the most depending on what situation and what champions you're playing, or even what role you're playing. The only rune that's kind of the exception is Nimbus Cloak, because when you use the summoner spell, you gain movement speed. Every champion has 2 summoner spells, so yeah, that's pretty much the only exception really for what I just mentioned with the inspiration rune. It gets used quite a lot. I think the move speed is quite nice. It gets used in the jungle quite a bit because you can smite enemy champions and you can gain a little bit of extra movement speed, or it can be used quite a lot on dual lane carries to gain the extra movement speed when you're using like ghost or flash to get away. Gives you a lot of kiting. The movement speed also scales really, really well into the mid and late stages of the game and scales quite well. So that can also be very, very good. But yeah, Nimbus Cloak, pretty good at the moment. Gaining extra movement speed is not a bad thing. Movement speed is a very, very underrated stat in Wild Rift. Transcendence. This is also the other new rune that got added in the most recent patch. Again, another very, very strong rune. I think what they've done by removing Hunter Titan and Hunter Genius and replacing it by Perseverance and Transcendence was very, very good. I think it was very, very smart move from Riot, because both of these runes are a lot more impactful straight away at the start of the game. Transcendence has a little bit of scaling though as well. So at level 1 you gain 6 ability haste, at level 6 you gain another 6 ability haste, and at level 11 when you use an active ability, if that hits an enemy champion, then it reduces the skill by 15%. This rune is very, very powerful on any champions that want ability haste. Basically the last part doesn't really mean too much. I mean, it's okay, like, you know, last part can be used on some champions quite effectively, but basically any champions that want a lot of ability haste, you take this rune on. Karma loves ability haste, Orianna loves ability haste, even champions like Lucian love ability haste. There are so many champions that love ability haste, especially mainly AP mages and supports. So any champions that love ability haste, cool. At level 6 is very, very powerful. You gain 12 ability haste at level 6, sorry, which most of the time at level 6 is just going to be after the first objectives, sometimes even before the first objectives, but most of the time it will just be after the first objectives, which gives you a huge power spike, because 12 ability haste is very, very strong. Sweet Tooth, pretty much good in any scenario, to be honest with you, whether you're playing Baron lane, mid lane, or down in the dual lane. Sweet Tooth is always a good rune to take. If you're a bit hesitant and you don't really know what rune to take, you don't really know what rune suits you best, then just take Sweet Tooth. It's pretty good. You know, increase your hunting fruit healing by 20%, and each hunting fruit also gives you 15 gold. So again, it's one of them runes that can be used on many different champions in many different roles, kind of like Nimbus Cloak in a way. So you can just go back, heal up a little bit more, and to be honest, who doesn't love a little bit of healing? And also free gold, pretty damn good. Demolish most of the time only gets used in the Baron lane and mid lane, sometimes in the jungle. Actually, supports have been taking this quite a lot now, so it actually can be used in quite a lot of different roles, and this is very, very strong. Demolish giving you tower platings is very, very powerful. Tower platings in the early game before 7.5 minutes give you so much gold in Wild Rift, and that big massive influx of gold can be really, really strong and allow you to buy an item or have an item advantage over your lane opponent, as I mentioned, whether that be in the Baron lane, whether that be in the mid lane, or like I said, even some supports are taking it now as well. I think it's a little bit more risky to take on supports because it's quite difficult to walk up and proc bone plating. You have to remember, you have to walk within close enough range to be able to let the demolish tick, and then after it fully ticks, you can auto attack and do a huge massive damage to the towers. But it can still be really, really strong if you have an aggressive early game, if you get an early game advantage, if you can get tower platings, like 75 gold to you and your support. So really, really good. And again, it's even more effective in Baron lane and mid lane, because if you get tower plating, then boom, 150 gold just like that. So very, very strong rune. Like I said, pretty much gets used on some champion. It's even good in jungle as well, because if you gank a lane and if you get a few kills, you can push the lane and proc demolish on the tower, which will give you and your team more gold. So very, very strong rune. Pathfinder most of the time gets used by just supports and junglers. The reason being is that supports love to roam, so gaining movement speed in the river is quite nice, and obviously jungles are going to spend most of the time in the river, so gaining movement speed is always quite nice. Another cool unique thing with Pathfinder is that it works quite well with Warmogs. Because Warmog's passive allows you to regenerate health very, very quickly. Most of the time, the Pathfinder, the second part of Pathfinder, where you restore missing health or missing mana based on lowest value, your lowest value is pretty much always going to be mana. So restoring mana is very, very nice for Pathfinder. Also gaining bonus movement speed is also pretty damn nice for Pathfinder. Again, allows you to roam around the map a lot quicker, allows you to get to places a lot quicker. Again, really good for supports that love to roam, like Pike, Thresh and Nautilus, or really good for junglers as well, which allow you to like gank really easy and just roam around the map a lot quicker. Mastermind pretty much only gets used on junglers, but the rune is pretty good. Dealing 10% bonus true damage to epic monsters allow you to take objectives very, very quickly, whether that be Rift Herald, dragons, barons, anything like that. This is actually really, really strong at the moment because of how weak barons are now. If you can get a small advantage at level 12, at 12 minutes, sorry, when the Baron spawns, Baron does not have a lot of health anymore, and also doesn't really do that much damage. So you could just walk up to Baron as like 3 people, and to be honest, you could just take it with Mastermind very, very easily. So very, very strong, very good at taking objectives early on. And to be honest, objectives are such a big thing in Wild Rift, whether it be dragons, Rift Herald, or Baron. They give you so many bonus stats that it's just a really, really strong rune overall. Mana Flow band weak on the Mana Flow band a bit on weak sides. I think it's only unique to champions that build Manamune or Archangel stuff, because mana gives you more damage for them 2 items. So champions like Ezreal, for example, can take Mana Flow band to get more damage from Manamune, which gets upgraded into Mirror Mana, or champions like Orianna that wants a little bit of mana, so then Archangel staff can, you know, deal a little bit more damage, and then Seraph Embrace can give you more of a shield when you upgrade it. But to be honest, I think most of the time you don't even take it for Archangel stuff and Seraph Embrace. It's mainly just for Manamune, because champions like Orianna and AP mages would rather have the ability haste rather than more mana. So Transcendence is always going to be better for AP mages. So like pretty much only gets used on Ezreal, and that's about it. You know, any champions that kind of want that little bit of extra mana. And Ezreal and Corki as well. It could also be really, really good. And then lastly is Pack Hunter. I don't think this rune is that good at all. Wanted by allied champions, you gain bonus movement speed for each unique ally you participate in a takedown with. You gain 50 gold and your ally gains 50 gold. Again, another rune that I feel like needs to be reworked or just removed from the game entirely, because the rune's not that effective at all. You know, you compare this rune to like Pathfinder, for example, which you gain flat movement speed instead of percentage movement speed, which flat movement speed is a lot more effective than percentage movement speed, by the way. Yes, you can get some takedowns. Yes, you can get some cool extra gold with Pack Hunter, but again, not as effective as, like, you know, gain ability haste, allowing you to heal, allowing you to take tower plates quicker, which will give you gold. Bonus epic monster damage. Pathfinder, which gives you a lot of movement speed. Nimbus Cloak even gets you more movement speed as well. Like, look, you compare this is gain 2% bonus movement speed. Nimbus Cloak, use the summoner spell, you gain 10% bonus movement speed, which scales up to 40%. So why would you take Pack Hunter when you could just take Nimbus Cloak? You know, it's one of them things. Even the same with Pathfinder as well. Yeah, anyway, that is pretty much it for the rune tier list. Again, please take this rune tier list with a pinch of salt. There are some situations where these lower runes can be used, but like I said, just a quick overview. These are all the runes. I think there are some runes that need to be either reworked or just removed from the game. Loyalty, Pack Hunter, and Conditioning are the three that I can think of. Even though Font to Life only gets used on Brom, I feel like you just need this rune just for Brom, because if Brom doesn't have this, then it feels really bad. But yeah, I think Pack Hunter, Loyalty, and you know, Conditioning need to get some sort of rework or something, or just be removed or replaced, kind of like what they did with Hunter Genius and Hunter Titan. Even though Hunter Genius and Hunter Titan were pretty good, they got replaced by such better runes. You know, Perseverance, absolutely insane. Transcendence, also really good. But I'm excited what they do with runes, because it seems like we're just getting more runes and more replacements, and also better runes as well. So really excited to see what happens with runes in the near future with Wild Rift, and also in the far future as well, to see, you know, what sort of runes we're going to be getting. We're going to get more PC runes, are we going to get more unique runes, you know, like Perseverance and also Transcendence? Even though Transcendence come from PC, kind of works a little bit differently. But yeah, anyway, I hope you enjoyed this anyway. Hope you enjoyed me going through all the runes and giving you my perspective on the runes. Again, let me know what you think down in the comments, and as always, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next Wild Rift video. Peace.